G3 Assistance through Virginia's community colleges is your pathway to a new future, helping those who qualify pay for school and train for the right career. Right where you are, right now. Get a skill. Get a job. Get ahead. You can learn more at vccs.edu/G3.
This is a CBC podcast.
This is Podcast Playlist. I'm Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud. And y'all know who Matthew Perry is, right? Chandler Bing from Friends? Could he be any more famous? What you may not know about Matthew Perry is that he's a huge hockey fan. One night, he was at a Los Angeles Kings game, and no big deal. Guess who was sitting beside him?
I was sitting next to Wayne Gretzky, which was amazing because he's one of my heroes, and he was hilarious. I can't really remember most of what he said, but he drank 9 beers and just was going off on all the players and telling me about them, and I got to sit and watch a hockey game with Wayne Gretzky. It was amazing.
It's ridiculous, is what it is.
Yeah. It was surreal. And
yeah.
I got his phone number, and I've been texting with him.
What?
Yeah. Pretty cool.
Now,
but he's sort of like, remember Jim Carrey in The Mask? Do you remember Jim Carrey in the movie The Mask? Remember that?
I'm waiting to hear this analogy.
Where you're like, that's great, but put the mask back on.
Go back to being the great one?
Talking to Wayne Gretzky is sort of like that. It's like, that's great, but talk about hockey more. Don't talk about anything else.
Yeah. No, your kids sound great.
Yeah. Talk about all the goals you scored. That's where you got me.
Yeah.
Because Jim Carrey in The Mask was not so funny without the mask on.
Yeah. Also, it's such a danger meeting your heroes.
Yeah, well, he didn't disappoint, though. He was hilarious and very sweet and very nice to the person I was at the game with. And he's a great guy, and he's got quite the life. I think he just drinks beer and plays golf all day long.
Celebrities. They're just like us. I too drink beer and golf all day long. Is that not what you do? Anyway, seriously though, if you're a hockey fan, imagine just casually watching a game with the great one himself. That was Matthew Perry on the Kevin Pollak Chat Show podcast. Keep tripping on the... Oof. No matter who you are or how famous, meeting your idols is a big, big deal. Today we find out what happens when we meet our idols. Coming up, a radio DJ finds out what happens when you get between a band and their hardcore fans. But first, a lonely teenager tries to buddy up to her favorite movie star through a very ill-advised fan letter. Here's Katie Leisner sharing her story on the Mortified podcast.
So, 8th grade was a rough year for me. I would spend whole weekends alone in the basement watching old black and white movies in the dark. And I especially loved the old movie actresses. They were so pretty and so socially competent. And one actress in particular enthralled me. Katharine Hepburn. At 13, I wrote her a candid letter, one Katharine to another. Dear Miss Katharine Hepburn, I'm just a 13-year-old girl living in Peoria, Illinois, whom you've never met. You don't even know that I exist, but I've become very aware of your existence. For the past 2 or 3 years now. I mean, it's not like I idolize you or anything, but you've fascinated me, entertained me, and have become a larger factor in my life than I had ever dreamed or intended you would be. So, since you have done so much for me, I would like to do something for you. Quite frankly, I'm worried about you. I really care for you, and I'll tell you why. You have inspired me. You've moved me to tears, you've made me laugh, and you've also taught me to dread the words, the end, because every time I see them in one of your films, I always, always cry because I don't want it to end. I want it to go on forever and ever, but it won't, and neither will you. So I've decided to do something about it in your case. I want to help you because, as I've said before, I really, truly care for you. Aren't you ever lonely? Ever? Don't you ever feel lost? Don't you ever feel weak and need someone to be there? That person is Jesus. He's my savior. I feel absolutely, completely contented. Do you realize I have nothing to fear? It's so wonderful to have nothing to fear, not even death. Please accept him as he has accepted you. Please write me back and tell me what you think. So, as you can probably tell, a little nugget that I had picked up from her autobiography is that Katharine Hepburn was an atheist. Determined as I was, I didn't send it. Instead, I redrafted it, this time concentrating very hard on coming off as chill. Dear Miss Katharine Hepburn, hello, let me introduce myself. I'm Katie Leisner, a 13-year-old girl living in Peoria, Illinois. I've tried many times before to write a letter to you, but they all seem so solemn. I guess I had it stuck in my mind that you were the great Katharine Hepburn, so this time I've decided to loosen up. I know you're supposed to be an intelligent, independent-minded, eccentric, old movie actress. But I figure you're just a regular person like everybody else. Still, I've developed a fierce loyalty to my #1 favorite actress of all time. Guess who? That's right, it's you. Who else? So I would also like to say that I genuinely appreciate all the work you've done in films. Okay, moving right along. Next order of business. As you know, Ginger Rogers died not too long ago. Now, I know you weren't exactly a Ginger Rogers fan, but bear with me here. It got me thinking of how I would feel if that would have been you instead. I know exactly what I would feel. Tremendous guilt. Guilt over never telling you what you need to know. What you need to know is that Jesus loves you. He really does. He wants to make everything better. He doesn't want you to die. He wants you to have life. I know he's been there for you. Do you honestly think it was all just luck? You've been blessed with a long, wonderful life, but once you die, he won't be able to help you anymore. He's given you an entire lifetime to realize his love for you. It's not too late, though. This is another opportunity. I dare you to read Psalms or the New Testament. You might be very surprised at what you find. Discover for yourself. If you'd like to write back and tell me what you think of this letter, feel free. So I tried to stick the super casual landing there, but so I actually did send that letter, and about a week or so later, I, you wouldn't believe it, wrote one final letter to Katharine Hepburn. Dear Miss Katharine Hepburn, this is Katie Leisner again. I don't know whether or not you have received my first letter, but to tell you the honest truth, it's really eating me up inside. You mean everything in the world to me. I think about you all the time. I think how awful it must be for you to not know what lies ahead of you. You have been saved. Why can't you understand that like I can? And then it ends abruptly on that convincing note. In 2003, Katharine Hepburn died, as I foretold. You heard it here first. And shortly afterwards, I read her final authorized biography. And in it, her biographer said that the 1990s were a particularly difficult period for her. She was approaching 90 and struggling with poor health, and she wasn't getting film work anymore. And so instead, she filled her days by reading fan mail. My heart stopped when I read that. I was like, oh, please don't quote one of my letters in this biography of Katharine Hepburn. So I read on with one eye open, and mercifully, the book made no mention of my letters. But her biographer did say this. He said that she kept every last letter that she received, which means that somewhere in the archive of Hepburn's estate, there exists proof that a 13-year-old in Peoria, Illinois, reached out in her moment of loneliness to an 88-year-old in a moment of hers. And in that moment, we weren't alone. Thank you.
That is the Mortified podcast. It is a member of Radiotopia from PRX. Meeting your heroes is so exciting and nerve-wracking, let alone working with them. Paul Scheer is a comedian, an actor, a writer, and producer, and in the mid-2000s, he got a part in his first ever big-budget movie. The movie was Meet Dave. It's about aliens, and it stars Paul's comedy idol, Eddie Murphy. It was Paul's first day on set. He was stoked, but that's when things went downhill. Here's the podcast. I was there too.
I see this cool set. Like they have like 4 sets running in the stage already at once, and there's like, just the first thing I see is Eddie Murphy face down in this pile of sand. And I'm like, wow, that's Eddie Murphy.
The Arrival?
The Arrival.
Oh my God.
And so I'm like, wow. And I'm like, wow, that's Eddie Murphy. And they go, and then Eddie Murphy picks his head up out of the sand, and it's not Eddie Murphy. It's one of Eddie Murphy's doubles, who literally looks like Eddie Murphy from the ear to the nose. So if you just like touch from your ear to your nose, like that's what he looks like. So it's one of Eddie Murphy's multiple doubles, who I will meet 4 of in that one day. Oh. And so I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. That's not Eddie Murphy. And I get led over to my side of the set. And my side of the set is essentially a big wraparound green screen and a kind of like it looked like a painter's kind of thing. It's like a piece of plyboard and some steel, and that was it. That's all it was. It's like I was like on a platform in this thing, so I climb up the side. I'm up there, and the director comes over. And the director is Brian Robbins, who was from Head of the Class, if you remember him. He was like the cool guy. He was like the...
Oh, I didn't realize that. I knew he was an actor, like a young man actor. I didn't realize.
Yeah, he was like like the John Travolta in Cotter of Head of the Class.
Yeah, and he was on like Facts of Life and all of these shows.
Yes, and he has gone on to great success in the Nickelodeon world. I think he directed Varsity Blues too. Like he's like one of these big dudes. Yeah. So I'm also excited to meet him. I'm a Head of the Class fan. I'm a Hess head, Howard Hessman fan.
Who isn't?
So he comes over to me, and I'm again nervous. Even though I just shot a full season of my own show that I felt very comfortable on. This is new, all new to me, and I feel like this is a big budget movie, and the first time I kind of ever really had done anything like this, and I'm on this platform, and I'm like, okay, so is there anything that I need to know? Because there's literally nothing there. It's a platform on green. There's no propage. There's no, is that a word? I don't know. There's nothing.
This is pure Star Wars prequels territory.
Exactly.
It's just void.
I'm in a gray costume with a smock on, and the smock in the center has a little butt. That's it, a little butt on the thing. So I'm up there, and I go, what am I looking at? And the director looks at me and goes, I don't know, man. It's a ship.
We should also say that the reason your name is Lieutenant Buttocks is because all of these miniature aliens operate one specific part of this giant ship. So like Brian Husky is Lieutenant Right Arm.
Yes.
And everybody has their mission. So you literally operate the butt
exactly.
of Eddie Murphy.
And so I'm like, he goes, it's and this will come into play in just a second because he goes, it's a ship, and I go, oh, okay,
Does he have that kind of attitude? Like,
oh yeah, it was not a friend. It was like, what are you asking me? Ship. I remember being like, oh, I'm an idiot. Like,
this
but
breaks my heart.
You know, and I didn't know. I didn't know what to do. You know, so and it's a complicated camera move because the camera's like behind me and it's like dollying up and I'm turning around. It's elevated. I was nervous. You know, a little bit nervous. So I'm doing this thing. And they give me like an iPad, and before iPads, and I have to turn into camera and go, sir, we had a gas leak. It was silent but not deadly. Great line from Lieutenant Buttocks.
It's still
classic
in the film.
joke. Yeah, classic joke. And so I turn around. I do my line, sir, we had a gas leak. It was silent, not deadly. And cut. Man, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, what? He goes, you got to like play with the controls. I go, he goes, well, I go,
this infuriates me. Why is he such a jerk? He hasn't told you this?
No, not told me this at all. And I go, he goes, yeah, you got like a control over here, you got to look in the screen. I'm literally, again, I just want to say it again. I am on a platform, a race platform with nothing. So he's like, yeah, look at the screen, you touch the control, and you do the thing. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. You know, now I'm a little nervous, a little bit more nervous. Again, action. Sir, we had a gas that goes silent, not deadly. And hear him yell, more military, just yelling it. I'm like, sir, we had a gas leak. It was silent, but not deadly. Angrier. Sir, we had a gas leak. Now, like, I'm like, I'm doing a scene with no one. It's a line. He's like, just like more matter of fact. Sir, we had a gas leak. Silent. You know, I'm like doing this line, and it's, you know, it's the line is the line.
Can I just pause to say that the guy who ends up doing this does none of those readings?
There you go. This will blow your mind where it goes. Okay. So I'm like, I'm freaking out, and he goes, and again, how can you mess up that line? I could say that anyone you put him, it's not acting. Right. You're just saying a statement, and you're just saying, and I see him walk off set, like walk just by, and I go. And I know enough to be like, something is wrong. So now I'm standing on this platform alone. I can't get down because I need to be like craned up there. God. I don't know what's going on. I see the director walk off. I see the AD walk off. And no one's telling me anything. At which point, every pore in my body starts to sweat. Like, poof, poof, poof. And then a couple minutes pass. Minutes. And the AD comes over, lovely guy, whoever that AD is, awesome dude. And he says to me, hey, we're having some camera problems.
Can we
go back to, we'll send you back to your trailer. And I said, okay, knowing there's no camera problems.
Yeah.
What goes on? So I go back to my trailer. I call my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and I call her and go, June, I don't know what's going on. I feel like I went in there and I don't know what's happening. And she's like, do it for me. I'm like, okay, sir, we had a gas leak. It was silent, not deadly. She's like, you're fine. That's fine. You're doing it fine. I'm like, and I did it like this. And she's like, you're fine. You're fine. I'm like, I'm just nervous. I don't know what's going on. She's like, they probably did have camera problems. Don't worry about it. So I'm sitting in my trailer. I'm waiting. I'm like freaked out now. Then all of a sudden, knock on the door. Like, I open the door. It's a guy I've never seen before. Older man, lovely man, nice guy. Opens the door and he goes, hey, can I talk to you for a second?
Oh, no.
And I go, sure, come on in. Now, I told you that these trailers are tiny. So when he enters, and he was
on the toilet?
He's a big man. So he literally pushes me back into the bathroom area. So now I'm essentially over a toilet.
And you're still in costume, right?
Still in costume. And he goes, this is the worst part of the job. And I'm like, oh, God. He goes, we're going to recast you. And I go, oh, okay. And he goes, yeah. We just, we want to go a different way with the part. And I go, oh, I'm mortified and immediately angry because I'm like, I came here. I could have been in New York doing the thing that I'm supposed to be doing, which is my show and the 24 hours. And I'm like upset and mad. I'm just trying to keep it all together. I'm like, okay. Yeah. And he's like, but look, we would like to offer that you stay and be an extra today. You get residuals. And I'm like, thank you so much. I don't think I'm going to be doing that. I don't want to go from a part where I was in like 3 or 4 scenes to an extra. And I didn't say that, but I was like, no, I'm fine. He was like, hey, well, if you leave now, you're not going to get residuals. And I was like, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay. And then he goes to leave and he goes, actually, before I go, can you get your smock? And I go, what? He goes, yeah, let me get your smock. So I go, okay. And I give him my smock. Like I literally sheath myself. I'm like, here it is. I give him my smock and he leaves. Second later, costume person. She walks in. She's like, hey, do you have your smock? And I go, no, that guy just took it. She's like, oh, okay. We need to give it to the video playback guy. I'm like, what? And they go, oh, we recast you with the video playback guy.
I saw that online. Oh my God.
The video playback guy, just so you guys understand, is a guy who is on set so you can watch dailies immediately. It's like, hey, what did we just shoot? Let's go over to the video playback guy. He'll play it back. So the video playback guy now is doing my part.
And nothing against this guy, but let's just quickly...
By the way, probably a great video playback guy.
Probably one of the best. But as an actor, he's done Meet Dave.
Yes.
Norbit. Mm-hmm. And Smokin' Aces.
Well, let me tell you the 2 reasons why he can. At least he's been the other one. So that will come up in a second.
I had a feeling this is heading somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm like, oh, the video playback guy, and now I don't know what to think because I'm like, do you think so? And no offense to the video playback guy, but you're video playback guy. I'm like, do you think so less of me that the video playback guy is going to turn into better? I don't know what to think, and I'm just mortified. So I take my backpack, throw it on my shoulder. I'm like trying to get an earlier flight home because I don't need to be up for 36 hours. I'll go home to New York now, and I'll do it. And I feel like Bruce Banner leaving at the end of the Hulk, like dee, 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 dee.
So Paul goes to leave when yet another person chases him down. This new guy tells him he's not actually fired. He's just been given a different part and convinces Paul to come back on set. And while waiting on the sidelines, he finally gets to see his idol, Eddie Murphy.
We shoot the scene, we light it, we do the whole thing, and then there's this energy like, okay, Eddie's coming. Eddie's coming. Eddie's coming. Everyone we're ready to go. And all this tension and nervousness. And then just like the seas parted and this like light came in, Eddie Murphy just kind of ducks under the set and appears as this like, Eddie Murphy. And there he is, looking great, doing his thing, pops into his scene, does like one take, nails the line, and then he goes in for a kiss. It's this like kind of cool moment at the end. And the way that he's been treated is that he is this like you can't upset Eddie. So he shoots a scene, cut, we got it, and he's like, hey, what's up? Sits down on set and starts talking to everybody. He's like, oh, Kevin, he goes, you do stand up, right? And Kevin's like, yeah, I do stand up. He's like, and then but he knew Judah more. He's like, Judah, you do Governors? Ever do Governors? I used to do Governors all the time. And he's like, oh, to me, he's like, you do Best Week Ever, right? And I was like, yeah. And so now all of a sudden, Eddie Murphy's holding court in this tiny spaceship, so relaxed, so chill, doing impressions of like old club owners, talking about how he wants to do stand up. It's like for the end of the day, like this magical, like everything that you would want from Eddie Murphy, just being like the coolest.
Until you find out he was a double.
And then it was not Eddie Murphy. Yet another double. And so he's just being great. But now Eddie's talking to me about Best Week Ever. He's like, you're really funny on that show. And he goes, you do a sketch show? And I go, yeah. And I tell him about 24 Marathon. And meanwhile, Brian Robbins is like off to the side, and he's kind of seeing this. And Brian Robbins has been nothing but cold to me, you know? And so we get ready to do our scene. You know, I'm going to say Sure Beats Protein Squares. I do my line. He's like, perfect, you nailed it. Like, I'm like, okay. And then there's another guy who's in front of me who has a line. He's like, more military.
No.
More gay. More angry. Like, so I'm like, oh, this is his directing style, to just bark out adjectives. The one that was most offensive was more gay.
Is it the security guy?
Yes.
Who ends up playing the worst gay stereotype.
Oh,
and I get the feeling
offensive.
it's not even necessarily his fault. Like, it really was thrust on him.
Well, I saw him do that line or whatever, because everyone's kind of like hitting lines at the end. And he's like, and he's like, so that I saw that going on. So he's like, perfect. Scene ends. Eddie leaves, and Brian Robbins comes up to me. He's like, hey man, I'm so sorry. I about the before, I thought you were a fat guy from your headshot. I didn't watch the auditions. I just thought you were like, look at the headshot. I thought you were a fat guy, so I don't want to put a fat guy in there. And I'm like, oh. He's like, yeah, and you're not fat, so we need to rewrite it and give you something else. And I was like, oh, okay. So now that's the third reason I've been told that I've been recast. And I'm like, oh, okay. He's like, yeah, man, but you're great. We love it. This is great. You're awesome. Thank you for doing this. And I kind of leave happy. Like, I'm just like, yeah, like, okay. Like, you know what? It sucked. I got another part. It's going to be it was like the last line of the movie right before the kiss, too. It was like this penultimate moment of everyone's blah, 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 blah. And it's like, sure beef's protein squares. And Amber's like, haha, yes. And then kisses Gabrielle Union. They fly off into outer space. End of movie. I'm like, that's a memorable moment. Whatever. It's fine. Whatever.
That was I Was There Too. You heard comedian Paul Scheer telling his story to host Matt Gorley. Matt is basically a podcasting machine in addition to I Was There Too. His Twitter bio has the line, "Oh God, I do podcasts," in all caps. He co-founded the podcast Super Ego back in 2006. He currently produces Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, and you've probably already heard him as a guest on Comedy Bang Bang. Way back in 2016, our former host Lindsay Michael caught up with Matt to talk about I Was There Too and how he became a sportscaster, kind of. Here's their conversation.
Hi, Matt.
Hi, Lindsay. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. So you got into podcasting really early in 2006 when Super Ego came out. What made you want to get into that medium?
I think because I was working with my great friend Jeremy Carter, and we had done a lot of video comedy, but the production value was making it so much work that we couldn't sustain it. And then I had started listening to podcasts myself. And as a kid, I always loved to just turn on an audio cassette tape recorder and record improvised stuff. And I thought, this is perfect for us. You can let the listener imagine all of the production value, and we can do kind of narrative improv, and that engages the listener more. And it's only audio editing you have to worry about. So it seemed like a no-brainer to me. And so we started around 2006 when almost nobody was listening, and just kept at it because it was fun. And then years later, the listeners came along.
What was it like making that transition from video to audio?
It was heaven.
Really?
Yeah, because you didn't have to build any props or worry about costumes.
Right.
And you could go with production value in, at least in the mind, that was a million times bigger. So sets could be on volcanoes or wherever you wanted it to be because no one could see it. All you had to do is just put in some sound effects and voila.
Improvisation, you mentioned earlier, seems to be a big part of all of your work. Why do you think it lends itself so well to podcasting?
I think because you can edit, you don't have to. Pistol Shrimps Radio is an example of us not editing and improvising absolute nonsense. Super Ego is an example of us improvising and then editing highly to tighten it up and tell a more cohesive story. So depending on which type you want to do, it doesn't even really matter which type. It just really allows the freedom of you can go anywhere with audio, especially, like I said, you can go anywhere in the world and all you need is a few sound effects, or even not. The audience will fill it in with their imagination.
Yeah, it's true. It is kind of like you can really just build whatever scenario and scenery and props you want just with suggestions and sound. So a lot of people have one or two podcasts. How did you end up with 4?
Oh, man, I ask myself that same question every day. And sometimes it's not even the question. It's a statement of like, you shouldn't be doing 4 podcasts. Well, 2 of them are kind of on a hiatus. So there was a point where I was doing 4 pretty regularly. And I think I was still having a lot of fun, and that's why I did it. Then it sort of at one point became a little bit too much work to sustain them all. So 2 are still alive, but they're whenever we feel like doing them, which is the best reason to do a podcast anyway, because it's, rarely a career. So we only want to do them when it's fun, and we still will. But 2 right now with I Was There Too, which is definitely a regular podcast that in a way is also a job for me too. And Pistol Shrimps Radio, which is purely for fun. Those 2 are pretty easy to keep up for the most part. I Was There Too requires about 10 hours for an episode of work, but It's still work I very much enjoy.
That's amazing. Like, what's the bulk of that work? Is it research?
It's everything. Yeah, I tried to figure that out myself, but you factor in 2 hours alone just to watch the movie, plus at least an hour of research, then an hour or two for the interview. Not that the interview takes that long, but by the time you get there and set everything up and get done, and then post-production time. I've sort of got some episodes down to about 7 hours, but it depends on the movie and the guest.
Right. So I was there too. For people who don't know that podcast, in every episode you speak to someone who has a small role in an iconic movie. It's a really cool concept. Do you think you get a different perspective on the film by interviewing someone who wasn't necessarily in one of the main roles?
Absolutely, and that's something I would have never have guessed before I started doing this. Even just watching the movie now, I'm watching Aliens from the perspective of one colonial marine in the background that dies halfway through, but it's a totally different movie. It's a good way to approach your favorite movies. Watch them from every character's perspective, plus you get a lot more mileage out of it that way.
So our show today, we're focusing on meeting your idols, and you've interviewed a lot of actors from very iconic films on your podcast. What's it like for you to meet all these amazing actors?
It's so fun and at times even a little nerve-wracking. One of my idols, no joke, was Jeanette Goldstein, who played Vasquez in Aliens. She was like the badass, heavy machine gun toting soldier with the headband. And I don't think up until that point I had been quite as nervous to interview somebody. Sometimes I would get nervous for interviews just because you'd never know what you're going to get. There's an X factor to some of these people if they haven't been working in a while, what kind of personalities they are. And so I have to quickly figure out how to handle the interviews as they come along. But she was just someone that I was so enamored with her character and her performance in that movie. And when she came in, she couldn't have been nicer. She couldn't have been more fun. And she's one of my favorite interviews of all time, and I still talk to her from time to time, and I just am so happy I got a chance to interview her.
What was one of the more surprising interviews that you've had on your show?
Joshua Burge from The Revenant, because up until that point, everything I had heard about The Revenant was controversy and conflict and this just grotesque long winter of horrible filming conditions. And in walks this incredibly nice, smart, wonderful, humble guy who didn't even really intend to be an actor, and he just kind of got swept up in it. It was one of his first few roles. He had done some really critically acclaimed shorts, but he just seemed to really appreciate the process, not to take it for granted, and you could tell that he really had a good time, and his version of that story comes out in the interview, and I really, really enjoyed talking to him as well. I think I expected someone like that was in the movie, just some hardened, bearded, grizzled fur trapper to come in and just spit all over the place, and he couldn't have been nicer.
So my co-host of this show, Matt Galloway, told me earlier how he chose not to meet David Bowie for an interview because he didn't want to be let down meeting one of his heroes in person.
Yeah.
Have you ever regretted meeting someone or finding out too much about one of your heroes?
Oh, boy. I don't know. This wasn't a meeting, but I saw one of my favorite musicians. I won't say who, but I saw him 2 nights in a row in 2 different venues. And he did all of this comedic banter that he really delivered like he was just thinking of off the top of his head. And it was word for word 2 nights in a row, which I have no issue with, but it was something about the way he would act like he was plucking it out of thin air or looking at something and it would remind him of it. And though I didn't meet him, I felt like, oh, that's disappointing. The person I think is the most witty musician there is suddenly has been really rehearsing his bits before the concert.
Oh, that's so sad. Can you still listen to his music?
Yeah, but it's more of a fault of mine, but it's slightly tainted because there's nothing about his shows that doesn't allow him to do that. He has every right to do that,
right.
But I don't know why. I guess it was working in improv or something. I wasn't judging him, but I think he really did a convincing job of making it seem like this was all stuff that was happening in the moment. And so I was slightly disappointed that it was a little contrived.
Is there anyone that you want to have on your show that you haven't met yet?
Yeah, I really want the woman who is captured at the bottom of the well from Silence of the Lambs. Yeah, and I've reached out to her a couple times, and I can never blame anybody when they are skeptical about a show like this, because they might think, what is this? I'm an extra, or is this for has-beens or something like that? And it really isn't. But, anybody who doesn't listen to the show wouldn't necessarily know that. And she's still very much a working actor. So I think it's been close at times, and we'll see. I also really want the guy who played Dak in Empire Strikes Back, who's Luke Skywalker's co-pilot in the snow battle and gets killed pretty quickly. And I think anybody from Star Wars is a tough get, because they just do conventions all the time and they're just used to this kind of thing and they get paid for it. And so it would take a special person, I guess, to come and do it.
What do you think what do you want your audience to get out of this podcast?
More than anything, I want them to get stories about what it was like on the day, not the stories you can read on IMDb, even though I sometimes cover those with the guests. I want the actor that I'm interviewing, I want their experience, not what it was like to be George Clooney in a movie or something like that, and tell us details. I love hearing about like the craft services, or this little thing happened with my costume, or did you know this about what we would do between takes. Even in the Revenant episode, Joshua Burge would talk about how he had a running joke with Tom Hardy, who every day would pass him and insult him vulgarly. And he was supposed to do this response every time. And the one time he didn't do the response, Tom Hardy comes up to him, and he's joking, but he comes up to him and goes, it doesn't work, mate, if you don't say it back. And it became this like almost OCD call and response thing they had to do every day. And I feel like you would never hear about that from Tom Hardy necessarily. So I love little things like that.
Matt Gourley, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. It was really nice talking to you.
G3 Assistance through Virginia's community colleges is your pathway to a new future, helping those who qualify pay for school and train for the right career. Right where you are, right now. Get a skill. Get a job. Get ahead. You can learn more at vccs.edu/G3.
Hi, I'm Michelle Shepard, host of Uncover Sharmini from CBC Podcasts. In 1999, 15-year-old Sharmini Anandavale disappeared on her way to a job that police believed didn't exist. 4 months later, her remains were found in a wooded ravine. I revisit the case that has stayed with me for over 20 years, ever since I first covered it as a cub crime reporter for the Toronto Star. You can find Uncover Sharmini on CBC Listen or on your favorite podcast app.
From the archives, that was the amazing Lindsay Michael and her conversation with the podcaster Matt Gourley. I'm Elamine Abdelmahmoud, and this is Podcast Playlist. You've heard the saying, never meet your heroes. Today, we're finding out what actually happens when you do. Our next story is from a guy who actually didn't meet his own idols. Instead, he found out what happens when you get between some passionate fans and their idols. In Tom O'Keefe's case, this involved clown makeup and a lot of root beer. And if it sounds bad, there's no surprise waiting for you at the end of the sentence. It is. From the Vancouver-based podcast The Laps, this is Send in the Clowns.
It's this new rock alternative, 105.7 The Point. I'm Tom O'Keefe. Coming up next hour, got chances for you to win tickets to see Foghat. Right now, here's Pearl Jam on The Point. Every Saturday from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. for 4 glorious hours, I got to be a DJ. Okay, just truth be told, it really wasn't 4 hours, because from 6 to 8, I had to play a pre-recorded countdown show called Out of Order with Jed the Fish. I was only allowed to talk for 4 breaks.
The Point.
No task was too small or mundane for me. I didn't ask any questions. I was like, yes, sir, I will knock that out. When you added it all up, it was like 90 seconds. The program director calls me into his office one day, and he says,
"You drive a decent car, don't you?"
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I just bought a car.
"Oh, really? What kind of car is it?"
It's a 1995 Geo Prism. And he's like,
"Well, that'll work." You've heard of Insane Clown Posse, right?
God help the person who is unaware of the next indie rock darling. I'm like, "Oh, of course. Yes, I've seen that band. They're phenomenal." Which was total.
Just in case you, like Tom, circa 95, are not up to date on your ICP.
Their onstage persona was that of serial killing clowns. Not that they would kill clowns, but they were clowns, but they were also serial killers. The worst of both rap and rock into one cohesive package.
Tom's views and opinions do not necessarily reflect that of the Live Storytelling Podcast, henceforth referred to as
They were coming to town for the very first time on the heels of their record label dropping them. My mission was to pick up the band from the hotel and deliver them to the local arena. The station had spent the day promoting ICP, which is what their fans called them. ICP would be stopping by the Point van to sign autographs and stuff. When they were done signing, I was supposed to return them to the venue where they were performing. Then the program director says, "Hey, since you're doing an air shift now and all, you might as well stick around for the concert and do the stage announcements." You've probably never given much thought to the stage announcement, right? Like, it's just the guy comes out and says something and walks off the stage. That's the most you've ever thought about it. I'd been going to concerts since I was 14. I would be picking up honest to God rock stars, or rock star-ish. That's what honest to God DJs did, was walked out and introduced the band. I was supposed to pick up ICP at the Holiday Inn Express at 6 p.m. I didn't even know the band members' real names.
At 5:59 p.m., Tom chances the lobby. And there, on the couch, sit two bleary-eyed gentlemen dressed not, I might say, inconspicuously.
Blue jeans, gas station-style work shirts, and, tellingly, clown makeup.
Violent J and Shaggy Two Dope.
"Hey, have you guys seen Insane Clown Posse anywhere?" And they're like, "We're Insane Clown Posse." I looked down at my t-shirt with the big radio station logo. Okay, clearly we will not be engaged in any witty banter. I ushered them out of the hotel lobby and into the luxury of the Geo Prism. We drive to the arena in silence.
After what certainly feels like a lengthy drive, Tom's clown car rounds the corner to the station's van.
A sea of people dressed in full clown regalia.
Shaggy locks the door on his side. What exactly is the plan here?
I don't know. Like, I thought, like, you could sign some autographs or something. The idea was just ludicrous to them. I was like, "I thought they were your fans." And he's like, "Yeah, no, we're not going out there. Those guys will kill us."
A volley of dark liquid fires off in the crowd.
"What do you think we are, crazy? We're not getting out of the car." So I'm like, "Well, look, come on, man. We've been promoting this on air all day long." And he's like, "Look, if you wanted us to do an autograph signing, we would have totally done that for you, but we set up a special room. We have security. It's a whole thing. We can't just walk into a crowd of people. We're not third eye blind. The Juggalos would tear us apart."
Tom blinks.
The Juggalos are fans. That's what they call themselves.
More volleys of liquid pop off.
So I'm like, "Okay, how about we'll just leave. I'll take you back to the station and you can do an interview there." We'll be like, "Oh, the intern, he freaked out, ran away. Like, you can pin it on me. I'll take the heat." Just as we're about to hold hands and sing Kumbaya, right? The Juggalos realized that the actual Insane Clown Posse was in the back of my car. It's at that point that I noticed the soda. With that, there is just an explosion of carbonation, and the car is completely covered in Faygo root beer. In the distance, the Point van is rocking back and forth. Like, the big giant mast is swaying back and forth. It's really easy to tip a van when it's got a big stick 25 feet in the air. The only way that I'm going to be able to calm this down is just to get the hell out of here. First thoughts are, turn on your windshield wipers, but all it does is kind of swoosh it around. So now the crowd has just been reduced to one giant milky splotch. I put the car in reverse, leaned on the horn, hit the gas, and hoped for the best.
Juggalos are pushing and surrounding the car on all sides.
I just started backing up. Oh. Then I realized that it was just a curb. And so once I realized it was a curb, then I gunned it, backed up, slammed it in the drive, sped away. Or as close to sped away as a prism can reasonably be expected to muster. I took them back to the station. They did their interview. The band blamed it on me. I didn't know this at the time. ICP's kind of onstage shtick was spraying the crowd with Faygo root beer, this really cheap discount brand of soda. At no point during an Insane Clown Posse show are they not spraying the crowd with Faygo root beer. And their fan base has just embraced this.
After the interview, Tom carts the posse over to their show at the American Theater. They head backstage while Tom gets a lay of the land. Lot of history.
Mae West and Houdini and Abbott and Costello had all played there. So it's this really cool theater in its heyday. And there was a balcony that ran along the perimeter, kind of like where Lincoln would have been shot. I had tickets to be in one of those little booths away from the crowd. So I go to my little Lincoln booth, and I just kind of set up camp. This guy walks in who clearly has even less reason to be there than I do. Dress pants on and like a button-up shirt. And he's got like this kid with him. It's like looks like he's like 12 or 13. And then it clicked for me. He was the general manager of the radio station. All the stations, because there were like 6 stations in the cluster, and he ran them all. I was like, oh, I wouldn't have pegged you for a juggalo, sir. And he's like, a what? And I'm like, never mind. We're sitting there talking, and there starts to be this like murmur from the crowd. It just starts to get louder and louder and louder. And I realize that it's starting to become a chant. The Point. They're chanting The Point over and over and over. What would cause that to even happen? Why would they suddenly start chanting that? And I realized it wasn't a what, it was a who, and it was me. The band had just spent 20 minutes on our station saying how they couldn't go to the meet and greet that these kids had been promised because I screwed it up. I'm up in this booth, and they can all see me, and I've got a big, giant Point logo on my chest. There's no way I'm going to get up in front of these people. That's just not going to happen. As that's going through my head, this blonde lady, she walks straight up to me, hands me a backstage pass.
Huh? What? Me?
You must have me confused with someone else. And she's like, well, how else are you going to do your stage announcement? You need your... And I'm like, don't say that out loud. The GM hears stage announcement. He's like, stage announcement? Wait, you got to go talk in front of these people? Well, I mean, I don't have to. He throws back his head in uproarious laughter. Oh my God, you have to do that. What a great story that'll be. Crap. Well, what are you going to do? I walk outside, and there's like 2 of just the largest security guards I've ever seen to escort me through the crowd because I was going to need it.
The guards buffer Tom on either side, trying to cut a path through the angry crowd.
People are like throwing stuff at me, chucking beers and cigarette lighters.
They push Tom through to the backstage area.
The sound immediately drops because it's kind of walled off. The concert promoter lady, she hands me a wireless mic and a flyer. She's like, here's the deal. You could tell she says this a million times. 60 seconds, the front of house will cut your mic. In 5 minutes, my head is spinning, and I'm trying to take all this in.
So, she says, any questions or anything?
Do you have any tips?
Sure. Maybe don't do it. Also read that thing.
She points to the flyer. Tonight's show sold out so quickly that they're going to come back in a month, and this has all the ticket information on it. Well, that is a life raft. I have something to say now. Like, not only do I have something to say, I have something to say that they're going to like. So with that, she spins me around, and they basically just, like, push me out on the stage. The curtains open. Crowd just cheers. They're all excited. And then they realize that I'm not Insane Clown Posse, and the cheering stops instantly. So I turn the mic on. Hey, I'm Tom from 105.7 The Point. What up, Juggalos? And there's just silence. ICP, you got to remember, like, back then they were still really underground. Only Juggalos called themselves Juggalos. When I had called them Juggalos, they had mistaken me for one of their own. Hey, you want to know when the next time ICP is coming to town?
Like that?
They're just so excited, and they're cheering and screaming. And so then I look at the flyer to read them the information, and I realize that I had dropped the flyer. It's gone. I have no idea where it's at. Where is the flyer? I just told them that I was going to tell them something. Well, do ya? Then you got to listen to 105.7 The Point tomorrow at 5 p.m. for a major concert announcement. And with that, I mic dropped it, spun around, and walked off the stage to the crowd cheering. Walked past the little blonde that just thought I wasn't going to be able to do that, and I'm just like, that's how you do that. Past the security guards, and they're going to take me back to the seat. Don't think I'll be needing you for the trip back, fellas. I open the door and I walk out, and as soon as I walk out in the crowd, I just get hit right in the face with a Faygo root beer. I make my way back to my booth, and I sit down, and I just kind of let the adrenaline dissipate.
The general manager gives Tom a clap on the back. That has got to be one of the most amazing comebacks I've seen in this business.
They wanted to kill you, and not only did you get them to not kill you, but you got them to now listen to a radio station that 10 minutes ago they were all chanting that station. You know, we do a lot of trade with restaurants around town. He's like, how about I use some of that trade to take you to lunch next week? And I'm like, holy cow, I'm a part-timer going to lunch with a GM. I have a question. Those trade deals that you do, are they just with restaurants? He's like, no, we do them with all sorts of things. Okay. Did you ever do any with a car wash?
The Laps podcast is hosted and produced by Kyle Jest. You can hear more and find all the podcasts we played this week at cbc.ca/podcast playlist. If you have an idea for a podcast that we should play, we would love to hear about it. You can tweet us a podcast playlist or send us an email, podcastplaylist@cbc.ca. This episode was produced by Kate Evans, Allison Broverman, AC Rowe, Phil Lung, and Tom Howell. Our executive producer is Arif Noorani. I'm Alameen Abdul Mahmood, and I hope you never meet your heroes. Or if you do, it goes really, really well, and they're so nice. One of the two, nothing in the middle.
For more CBC podcasts, go to cbc.ca/podcasts.